The deadliest battles you didn't learn in school. When history classes cover warfare, they usually focus on famous clashes like Gettysburg, Waterloo, or D-Day. These battles are important, but they represent only a fraction of humanity's bloodiest conflicts. Some of the deadliest battles in history are barely mentioned or completely ignored in standard education, often because they are complex, politically sensitive, or occurred outside Western Europe and North America. This article explores lesser-known but extraordinarily deadly battles, examining why they happened, how they unfolded, and why they remain largely absent from school textbooks. 1. The Battle of Stalingrad, 1942 to 1943, the war that devoured an army. Although sometimes mentioned briefly, the true scale of Stalingrad is rarely taught. Estimated casualties, 1.7 to 2 million. Location, Soviet Union, modern-day Volgograd. War, World War II. Stalingrad was not just a battle, it was 6 months of relentless urban slaughter. German and Soviet forces fought house to house, floor by floor, sometimes over single staircases or rooms. Why it was so deadly? Brutal winter conditions, temperatures below minus 30 degrees Celsius. Lack of food, medical care, and shelter. Stalin's not one step back order. Hitler's refusal to allow retreat. By the end, an entire German army group was destroyed, marking a turning point in World War II. Many soldiers froze, starved, or bled to death, never seeing an enemy bullet. 2. The Battle of Leipzig, 1813, the largest battle before the World War I. Also known as the Battle of Nations, this clash is surprisingly unknown. Estimated casualties, 120,000 to 150,000 location. Germany War, Napoleonic Wars. Leipzig involved over 600,000 soldiers from across Europe. France fought a coalition of Russia, Prussia, Austria, and Sweden in a desperate attempt to preserve Napoleon's empire. Why it's overlooked. Overshadowed by Waterloo complex alliances, confused simplified history narratives, occurred across multiple days and locations. The defeat forced Napoleon's retreat from Germany and eventually led to his exile. 3. The Siege of Changping, 260 BCE. Ancient warfare at its worst. One of the deadliest battles in human history, yet almost never taught outside China. Estimated casualties, 400,000 plus location. Ancient China War. Warring states, period. After defeating the Zhao army, the Qin general ordered the execution of hundreds of thousands of prisoners, bearing many alive. Why it matters demonstrates the extreme brutality of ancient warfare. Directly contributed to Qin unifying China casualties rival modern wars, despite primitive weapons. This single battle reshaped Chinese history and revealed how strategy and cruelty were often inseparable in ancient times. 4. The Battle of Tannenberg Line, 1944. Europe's forgotten bloodbath. Estimated casualties, 500,000 plus location. Estonia. War, World War II. This Eastern Front battle saw German and Soviet forces clash with devastating intensity. Soviet troops launched wave after wave of attacks against heavily fortified German positions. Why it's rarely taught, overshadowed by D-Day and Western Front narratives, took place in a politically sensitive region. Massive civilian suffering complicates the story. Entire villages were erased, and Estonia lost a significant portion of its population. 5. The Battle of Towton, 1461. England's bloodiest day. Estimated casualties, 28,000 to 30,000. Location, England War. Wars of the Roses fought in a blizzard. Towton remains the deadliest battle ever fought on English soil. What made it horrific? Soldiers fought for hours in freezing conditions. No prisoners were taken. Retreating troops were slaughtered. Bodies clogged rivers, turning the water red with blood. Yet many students learned more about royal marriages than this catastrophic event. 6. The Battle of Guadalcanal, 1942 to 1943. Death by jungle, estimated casualties, 60,000 plus location. Solomon Islands. War, World War II. Unlike European battles, Guadalcanal killed soldiers through disease, starvation, and exhaustion as much as combat. Why it's forgotten, overshadowed by Pearl Harbor and Midway, took place in remote terrain. Harder to dramatize than amphibious landings, malaria, dysentery, and malnutrition devastated both sides, proving that nature can be as lethal as any enemy. 7. The Battle of Verdun, 1916, a grinder of men. Verdun is mentioned in textbooks, but rarely with emphasis on its true purpose. Estimated casualties, 700,000 plus location. France War, World War I. The German strategy was not to capture territory, but to bleed France dry. We will bleed them white, German High Command. For 10 months, soldiers lived in mud, surrounded by corpses under constant shelling. Why these battles are often ignored. National bias. Countries highlight victories, not disasters. Curriculum limits. Teachers must simplify complex wars. Political sensitivity. Some battles challenge national myths. Geographic focus. Non-Western conflicts are often marginalized. As a result, history education sometimes sanitizes war, hiding its true human cost. Conclusion. Remembering the forgotten dead. These battles remind us that war is rarely heroic. It is chaotic, cruel, and devastating, especially for ordinary soldiers and civilians who had little choice but to endure it. By studying these lesser-known battles, we gain a deeper understanding of global history, greater empathy for human suffering, a clearer picture of the true cost of war. History should not only celebrate victories, it should remember the lives lost in silence. The deadliest battles you didn't learn in school. Part 2. While famous wars dominate textbooks, many battles that caused massive loss of life remain hidden in footnotes or ignored entirely. These conflicts shaped nations, destroyed populations, and changed history, but are rarely taught because they challenge simplified narratives of heroism and victory. 8. The Battle of Leningrad, 1941 to 1944. Death by starvation. Often reduced to a siege, Leningrad was in reality one of the longest and deadliest battles in history. Estimated casualties, 1 to 1.5 million civilians and soldiers. Location, Soviet Union, modern St. Petersburg. War, World War II. The German army surrounded the city for 872 days, cutting off food, fuel, and supplies. Civilians survived on ration cards that sometimes allowed less than 500 calories a day. Horrors of the siege, widespread starvation and disease, people collapsing dead in the streets, cases of cannibalism documented in official records, winters without heat or electricity. Despite unimaginable suffering, the city never surrendered. The price was catastrophic. Entire families disappeared. 9. The Battle of Manila, 1945. A city destroyed. Estimated casualties, 100,000 plus civilians. Location, Philippines War, World War II. Manila became one of the most devastated cities of the war, rivaling Berlin and Warsaw. What happened? As Japanese forces refused to retreat, American troops fought street by street. Japanese soldiers committed systematic massacres of civilians, while artillery bombardments flattened entire neighborhoods. Why it's forgotten, overshadowed by Hiroshima and Nagasaki, occurred far from Europe. Civilian suffering doesn't fit traditional battle narratives. By the end, Manila lay in ruins, and its civilian death toll exceeded many better-known battles. 10. The Battle of Kiev, 1941, the greatest encirclement. Estimated casualties, 600,000 plus Soviet troops. Location, Ukraine. War, World War II. This battle resulted in the largest military encirclement in history. German forces trapped massive Soviet armies, capturing or killing hundreds of thousands of soldiers. Why so deadly? Stalin refused to allow retreat. Soviet troops ran out of ammunition and food. Entire armies were annihilated in weeks. Most captured soldiers never returned, dying in prison camps from starvation and exposure. 11. The Taiping Rebellion battles, 1850 to 1864. A Civil War apocalypse. Not a single battle, but a series of brutal clashes that together formed the deadliest civil war in history. Estimated deaths, 20 to 30 million. Location, China. Major engagements like the Battle of Nanjing turned cities into killing fields. Why it's rarely taught. Non-Western history is often minimized. Difficult to explain religious and political complexity. Casualty numbers challenge modern assumptions. Entire provinces were depopulated, farmland destroyed, and rivers filled with bodies. 12. The Battle of the Somme, 1916. The day that broke a generation. Estimated casualties, 1 million plus. Location, France War, World War I. On the first day alone, the British Army suffered nearly 60,000 casualties, the bloodiest day in its history. Why it's misunderstood, often portrayed as necessary, rarely explained as a failure of leadership. Human cost minimized in summaries. Soldiers walked into machine gun fire, believing artillery had cleared the way. It had not. 13. The Battle of Okinawa, 1945. The Typhoon of Steel. Estimated casualties, 200,000 plus, half civilians. Location, Japan War, World War II. Civilians were caught between Japanese forces who forbade surrender in American bombardment. Civilian tragedy, forced suicides. Entire villages wiped out, children used as messengers and soldiers. The scale of suffering influenced the decision to use atomic weapons rather than invade mainland Japan. Why schools avoid these battles? They expose leadership failures. They show civilian suffering. They complicate good versus evil narratives. They challenge national pride. Teaching these battles honestly forces uncomfortable questions about power, responsibility, and human life. Final reflection, what history leaves out. These forgotten battles show that victory often comes at unbearable cost. Civilians suffer more than soldiers. Many deaths were preventable. Remembering them is not about glorifying war. It's about understanding its true price. The deadliest battles you didn't learn in school. Part 3. As warfare moved into the modern age, weapons became more destructive. But many of the deadliest battles remained hidden behind colonial narratives, Cold War politics, and national censorship. Millions died far from the spotlight of Western classrooms. 14. The Battle of Kursk, 1943. The greatest tank battle in history. Estimated casualties, 250,000 to 300,000. Location, Soviet Union War. World War II. Kursk involved over 6,000 tanks, thousands of aircraft, and nearly 4 million troops. Why it was catastrophic: massive minefields, relentless artillery bombardment, close-range tank combat. German forces never recovered from the losses. After Kursk, the Eastern Front turned permanently against Nazi Germany. 15. The Algerian War Battles, 1954 to 1962. Torture and urban warfare. Estimated deaths, 1 to 1.5 million. Location, Algeria. War, Algerian War of Independence. Battles like the Battle of Algiers introduced modern urban counterinsurgency warfare. What schools often skip: systematic torture, civilian disappearances, mass executions. The conflict shattered France's global image and inspired future resistance movements worldwide. 16. The Battle of Hue, 1968, Vietnam's hidden massacre. Estimated casualties, 20,000 plus. Location, Vietnam War, Vietnam War. During the Tet Offensive, communist forces captured Hue. When they retreated, mass graves were discovered. Civilian tragedy, executions of teachers, doctors, and officials. Families buried together. Cultural and religious sites destroyed. This battle changed American public opinion, but is often overshadowed by larger Vietnam narratives. 17. The Chosin Reservoir Campaign, 1950. Frozen to death, estimated casualties, 80,000 plus. Location, North Korea War. Korean War temperatures dropped to minus 40 degrees Celsius, freezing weapons, flesh, and blood. Unique horror. Wounded soldiers froze solid morphine. Crystallized frostbite claimed more lives than bullets. Despite being surrounded, UN forces fought their way out, making it a tactical success at an unimaginable cost. 18. The Battle of Grozny, 1994 to 1995. A city erased, estimated casualties, 50,000 plus civilians. Location, Chechnya War, First Chechen War. Russian forces underestimated Chechen resistance, leading to disastrous urban combat. Why it's ignored. Political sensitivity, media restrictions, ongoing regional instability. Grozny became one of the most destroyed cities on Earth by the late 1990s. 19. The Iran-Iraq war battles, 1980 to 1988. Human wave warfare. Estimated deaths, 1 million plus location. Middle East battles, such as Basra and Majnoon Islands, featured child soldiers, chemical weapons, trench warfare reminiscent of WWI. Why schools avoid it. No clear good side. Ongoing political tensions. Western involvement complicates narratives. Young volunteers were sent across minefields with little training, often carrying only religious tokens. 20. The Rwandan Civil War and Kigali battles, 1994. Genocide in plain sight. Estimated deaths, 800,000 in 100 days location. Rwanda. Though often labeled genocide rather than battle, urban fighting and mass executions turned cities into killing grounds. Global failure. UN forces were ordered not to intervene. Radio broadcasts encouraged murder. Entire communities wiped out overnight. This remains one of the clearest examples of how inaction can be as deadly as war itself. The pattern behind forgotten battles, across centuries and continents, these battles share common truths. Civilians die first, and most political pride prolongs suffering. History favors victors' stories. Silence enables repetition. Why remembering matters. If history only teaches glorious victories, future generations may believe war is noble or necessary. Studying these forgotten battles builds empathy, challenges propaganda, honors victims who had no voice. Series conclusion, war's unspoken reality. The deadliest battles in history are often not the most famous. They are the ones that do not fit clean narratives, where heroism is drowned out by suffering. To remember them is not to glorify war, but to understand why it must be questioned. The deadliest battles you didn't learn in school. Part 4. Long before tanks, bombs, or machine guns, wars were already capable of killing hundreds of thousands. Ancient and medieval battles are often romanticized as heroic clashes, but many were acts of mass slaughter, famine, and deliberate extermination. 21. The Battle of Cannae, 216 BCE. A perfect slaughter. Estimated casualties, 50,000 to 70,000 Romans location. Italy War, Second Punic War. At Cannae, the Carthaginian general Hannibal executed one of the most devastating tactical maneuvers in history, a double envelopment. Why it was so deadly. Roman soldiers were packed tightly together. No escape routes. Fighting continued until exhaustion and suffocation killed. Many ancient accounts describe soldiers unable to lift their arms due to the press of bodies. Few escaped. 22. The sack of Baghdad, 1258, the end of a golden age. Estimated casualties, 200,000 to 1 million. Location, Abbasid Caliphate, modern Iraq. Invaders, Mongol Empire. When the Mongols captured Baghdad, they did not simply defeat an army, they destroyed a civilization center. What was lost? Libraries burned. Scholars executed, irrigation systems destroyed. The Tigris River was said to run black with ink and red with blood. The Islamic Golden Age never fully recovered. 23. The Battle of Talas, 751 CE, a silent turning point, estimated casualties, tens of thousands, location, Central Asia. Though rarely taught, Talas shifted the balance of power between the Tang dynasty and the Abbasid Caliphate. Why it matters, ended Chinese westward expansion. Led to the spread of papermaking to the Islamic world in Europe, changed global knowledge transmission. The battle's long-term impact far exceeded its immediate fame. 24. The An-Lushan Rebellion battles, 755 to 763 CE. The deadliest war you've never heard of. Estimated deaths, 13 to 36 million. Location, China. This rebellion caused a population collapse so massive that 1/6 of the world's population may have died. Why so many died? Prolonged warfare. Mass famine, entire cities annihilated. Despite its staggering death toll, it is almost unknown outside East Asia. 25. The Siege of Jerusalem, 70 CE. Starvation as a weapon, estimated casualties. 1 million location. Roman Judea. Roman forces crushed a Jewish revolt by surrounding Jerusalem. Atrocities recorded. Starving civilians fought over scraps. Cannibalism reported by historians. Temple destroyed completely. The siege permanently altered Jewish history and identity. 26. The Mongol invasions of Khwarezmia, 1219 to 1221. Cities wiped from the map, estimated deaths, 5 to 15 million. Location, Central Asia and Persia. Cities that resisted were completely exterminated. Mongol tactics, mass executions. Psychological terror, use of severed heads as warnings. Some cities never recovered, remaining ruins centuries later. 27. The Battle of Mohacs, 1526, a kingdom collapses. Estimated casualties, 14,000 to 20,000 Hungarians. Location, Hungary. The Ottoman victory destroyed the Hungarian army in less than 2 hours. Consequences, Hungary ceased to exist as an independent kingdom. Ottoman expansion into Europe accelerated. A political vacuum lasted centuries. One short battle reshaped Central Europe. Why ancient mass? Death is ignored. No photographs or film casualties, hard to imagine. Focus on kings, not people. Western curricula prioritize Europe. As a result, ancient victims become statistics instead of humans. What these battles teach us: technology does not determine cruelty. Civilizations can vanish in weeks. Mass death is not a modern invention. War has always been capable of erasing entire societies. Closing thought: history often remembers conquerors as geniuses and empires as glorious. But beneath those stories lie millions of forgotten dead, buried without names, lessons, or memorials. To study these battles honestly is to understand that progress has never guaranteed humanity. Colonial wars, imperial violence, and forgotten genocidal battles between the 16th and early 20th centuries, empires expanded across Africa, Asia, the Americas, and Australia. These expansions are often taught as exploration, trade, or civilizing missions. In reality, they involve some of the deadliest and most one-sided battles in history, where modern weapons were used against populations with little ability to resist. 28. The conquest of the Aztec Empire, 1519 to 1521. An empire collapses. Estimated deaths, 15 to 20 million. War plus disease. Location, Mesoamerica. Invaders, Spanish conquistadors and allies. The fall of Tenochtitlan is often framed as a dramatic military conquest. In truth, it was a catastrophic collapse of an entire civilization. Why it was so deadly: European diseases, especially smallpox. Siege warfare that caused mass starvation, mass executions, and enslavement. Within decades, the indigenous population of central Mexico was nearly wiped out. 29. The destruction of the Inca Empire, 1532 to 1572. Steel, disease, and betrayal, estimated deaths. Millions. Location, South America. A small Spanish force captured Emperor Atahualpa, triggering a chain reaction of civil war, famine, and disease. What schools often skip: forced labor in silver mines. Systematic destruction of culture and language, entire communities worked to death. The battle was not one event, but a slow, grinding annihilation. 30. The Congo Free State atrocities, 1885 to 1908. Death by quota. Estimated deaths, 10 million. Location, Central Africa. Ruler King Leopold II of Belgium. This was not a traditional war, but it involved constant armed violence. How people died. Executions for failing rubber quotas. Amputations as punishment. Villages burned, entire regions were depopulated. Yet for decades, this was hidden behind propaganda about humanitarian rule.